Okay, members, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your attention in that closed session where we've taken the NIPSO bill to the next phase. We have had apologies today, members from Alex Atwood, Michael Copeland, Megan Fearon and Chris Little. Alex Maskey, I think, is, because of the talks, questionable, and that is, I think that is it. So, it's our last session before Christmas, members. I know a lot of people are under pressure to get down to the political talks being chaired by the Secretary of State, but we were not quorate for a large part of last week's meeting. This is our last before Christmas. So what I propose, with your agreement, is that we postpone and reschedule the witness briefings that we had for today. Regrettably, I simply don't think we're going to manage to remain quorate. So if we're all agreed, we will stick to the urgent business that needs agreed today. Right, if the clerk's just reminding me that that's really the NILGA briefings with regard to our inquiry into Together Building a United Community. If we can remain quorate, it would be proposed to at least receive the briefing on January monitoring, because it is a pressing issue. But I see we are 5 at present, and we will drop to 4 at least very soon.
We have.
Well, we'll see how we go. Okay, members, at page 100 is correspondence from the Landscape Institute regarding a Landscape Futures NI event. They are hoping to hold it in the Long Gallery, and they have asked us as a committee to sponsor. Are we content to sponsor the Landscape Futures NI event? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Page 102. We have correspondence from Pat Ramsey, MLA, who's chair of the All-Party Group on Visual Impairment. Now, he's requesting that RNIB, the Royal National Institute for the Blind, be invited to appear before this committee regarding the promotion of the participation in public life of blind and partially sighted people, particularly in the area of public appointments. I'm not sure we have a policy in terms of taking requests from other MLAs. I think it's probably a worthy thing to do. But I'm worried about precedent, so what I was going to suggest was that I discuss with Mr. Ramsey in the first instance.
Yeah, I think that's the best way, Chair.
Well, maybe not necessarily an OFMDF thing anyway. It's probably more DFP as being the employer of civil service.
It's the public appointments, I think, that is the hook that brings it within our domain. But you're right, largely speaking. And would be at least cross-cutting.
You can tell me.
No, that's okay. So, Jimmy, sorry, in terms of the RNIB, I'm proposing that I go and speak to Pat Ramsey in the first instance and report back. Okay, right, that has been agreed by a quorate. Panel, right, well, 103 is an invitation from the Arts Council to the launch of the Creative Europe programme on Friday the 12th of December. If you would reply directly, please, members, that would be good. Page 105, an invitation to SIPFA's seminar on making the best use of public spending. That's on Tuesday the 16th of December. Just to note, members, on Monday I attended the latest European Chairs UK meeting in Scotland. Useful meeting where the chairs of all the committees who have oversight of European issues get together. We host it next time. I'm not, unless there are questions, I think we'll probably get a paper coming from the notes from the Scottish Secretariat, so unless anybody has anything pressing they want to ask at this stage, we'll move on to the question. Are members content we send out Christmas cards in e-card format from the committee as we have done in previous years? Thank you. A copy of the committee's current invitations is at page 106. Barring comment on that, members, we move on to item 4, draft minutes of 2 sets of minutes. The 26th of November begin at page 108 of your meeting pack, and the draft minutes of the 3rd of December minutes begin at page 114. Are we content to agree both?
Agreed.
Thank you. Matters arising then, there were no further comments on the draft committee response to the draft budget for 2015-16, so it has been forwarded to the Committee for Finance and Personnel. That happened on Friday afternoon. A further response was received from ILEX on Friday past, and you'll find that for information at page 119. Are you content that we forward that ILEX response to the Committee for Finance and Personnel for their information? Thank you. And at page 122 is the list of outstanding correspondence. In the absence of any comment, I refer to the correspondence summary sheet on page 126. That's correspondence received since our last meeting, and I'm going to ask the clerk to highlight anything she thinks we need to think about making a decision upon.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just very, very briefly, we've received correspondence from the Department and from the Minister for Social Development in relation to the Belfast Islamic Centre, so it's just to get members' agreement to forward those responses on to the Belfast Islamic Centre for information. Also, we have from the CAL Committee correspondence, quite an amount of correspondence about the strategic review of Sign Language Partnership Group's roadmap. That starts at page 133 in your pack, and just to check if members are content to note that at the minute until the outcome of the review. Moving on to the Historical Institutional Abuse Inquiry, there's a response from the Department at 178. Page 178, sorry, in the pack, regarding correspondence from this committee about the scoping exercise for the Magdalen laundries and clerical abuse. And just to check if members want to write back to the department to request a copy of the scoping paper when it's been finalised. Still under consideration. And members will be aware, page 189 in the pack, there's a news release about the new Commissioner for Children and Young People in Northern Ireland, and it's just to check if the committee wishes to receive a briefing at a future date in the work programme. Yeah. And just to refer members quickly to table papers, and these are more matters for noting, they're papers that have come in lately. At page 42, we've got the EU priorities. There's the 2013 to 14 report on the Executive's EU priorities, the statement of priorities for 14-15 and the mid-year review on 14-15 are there as well. They're just provided for information at the moment. The committee has a briefing scheduled on Barroso actually for the 4th of February, so the committee will have a chance to go into it in more detail at that stage. Also, the child poverty strategy, we've also received the annual report for 13-14 and the draft child poverty strategy is the page 137 in the table pack. Again, at this point, it's just for noting that we're scheduling a briefing in for January on the child poverty strategy. And finally, there is correspondence from a member of the public at page 341 in the table pack. It relates to a personal matter which appears to relate more to the Committee for Justice's remit, and they have also received this. So it's just to bring that to members' attention, just to note at this point in time.
Just in terms of that, you know, the usual, I assume that that's not going out into public domain, given
No.
that it's a
No, absolutely not.
data protection
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Any other correspondence anybody wishes to raise? What I suggest, members, is we ask the clerk maybe when we come back in January just to go over anything over the last 2 weeks when we have been maybe a bit more rushed than we would have liked to have been. So double check we haven't missed anything. Members, there is a statutory rule, draft statutory rule to discuss. It's with regard to the annual salary for the Assembly Ombudsman. Page 208 of your packs has the clerk's brief, and the correspondence from the department is at 209. This would provide for an increase in the annual salary for Dr. Tom Frawley as Ombudsman and Commissioner for Complaints. The proposed increase would represent £767 per annum, and it would follow a 1% increase which was paid in April 2013, and that was on the back of a pay freeze from 1st of April 2009. So this draft statutory rule is offering £767 per annum of an increase, and it's proposed that that would be retrospective from the 1st of April last. So, any comments, or are we content to support the statutory rule?
Content.
And?
Well, not really, but do we have a choice? You know, especially when people are on their knees.
Well, do you want to formulate that into a... Do you want to...
Do we have a choice?
Well, you can ask for, ask for a vote.
Chair, just point out this isn't the formal statutory rule. This is just the proposal at this stage. The rule will formally then come to the committee for consideration again at a later stage. Although it is usual for a committee to indicate back to the department at this stage whether they will be content with the rule that comes forward.
Chair, my understanding was that although there had been a 1% increase, it didn't apply to senior positions. Is that not right? I think we need some clarification around that.
Right.
That we're not just bounced into automatically having to agree.
It's related to judiciary rather than...
Salaries relating to Judicial Group 6.1b increased from 1st of April. Okay, we need to seek clarification. Okay, yeah. Okay. Members, final thing that needs decision is actually the draft forward work programme, because it's pretty busy in 2015. So I picked it to page 3, 4, 5 year packs. First of all, there's a private members bill on children's services cooperation bill being sponsored by Stephen Agnew. Are members content to request a briefing from the bill's sponsor prior to its second stage reading? Yeah. Members also content to request a briefing from departmental officials on the implications of this bill for OFMDFM, again prior to second stage. Okay. The European Commission is expected to publish its next work programme shortly. This committee, of course, coordinates a report on European priorities for Assembly committees. Are you content to ask Assembly Research for an update on the current position of the priorities identified by the committee for 2014? Agreed? Thank you. The Committee for Health has requested the use of this room for their meeting on the 14th of January. Are we content that we will switch to the Senate chamber on January the 14th? And are members content with the proposed forward work programme, subject to amendments agreed today? Right. That's everything. The next thing is January monitoring, which we. Oh, sorry. So, members, we are quoted to receive the briefing, not to make decisions. If anybody feels they're going to need a way in the next half hour. No? Stephen, you're okay?
I'm okay.
Okay. Okay, members, we're going to get a briefing now from officials on the department's bid for January monitoring monies. Papers were received at 5 o'clock Monday. So they are tabled papers. It says page 343. That can be right, can it?
Yeah. Yes. There's so many characters in table papers.
We have tabled papers going beyond 350 pages. Okay, and in your table papers at page 351, you'll see a response to queries raised by the committee following the briefing on October monitoring, and for comparative purposes, the papers received with regard to the October monitoring bid are at page 215. And before we take the briefing, members, you'll see the response from the department with regard to October monitoring refers to queries raised by our former colleague, committee member George Robinson, with regard to Shackleton Barracks. Are we? Oh, I can't ask. Yes, I was going to ask if we were content to forward the response to George for his information, but maybe a party colleague will do the needful informally.
That's okay.
So, we welcome to committee Mark Brown and Stephen Boyd. Mark, you're very welcome. Stephen also, can you give us your thoughts?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the committee for inviting us here to provide an update on the department's financial position and our proposals in respect of January monitoring round. If the committee's content, I'll begin by quickly covering the department's financial position coming out of the October monitoring round to set the financial context within which we're proposing to submit bids as part of January monitoring round. And then I'll update the committee on the detail of those proposals. Through the October monitoring exercise, the department was successful in getting 2 bids met 1.3 million resource bid for the Victim and Survivor Service, and £341,000 for non-cash depreciation to cover depreciation within the department. The department was not successful in bids for 1.7 million for the VSS and 1.3 million for the costs of the Hillsborough sites. So following October monitoring, the department has identified some further pressures amounting to around £441,000 in respect of future expected exchange losses and staff holiday pay accruals. The department has incurred actual exchange rate losses of £376,000 this year. This is on EU exchange rate losses. And based on outstanding EU claims due to be paid by the end of the financial year, we estimate a further potential exchange rate loss of around £200,000. There's uncertainty around this amount due to the potential fluctuations in exchange rates in the last quarter of the year, and uncertainty over the precise timing of payments by the EU. The holiday pay accrual pressure is arising as a result of changes in how the accrual is calculated for the current year. The pressure is currently estimated at £241. £241,000. The department will cover these pressures from the budget easements. So following October monitoring, I wrote to all the departmental budget holders requesting that they identify any potential easements which could be used to address pressures going forward. A number of minor easements came forward, amounting to approximately £380,000, and these will be put against the pressures of £441k that I've mentioned. So we should be able to cover those emerging pressures from some of the emerging easements. In respect of January monitoring round, we're proposing to put forward 2 resource bids amounting in total to 5.324 million. 1.3 for victims and survivors, and 3.53 million for delivering social change for the 6 existing signature programmes and an additional 7th signature programme. The bid for the VSS of 1.3 is broken down as follows: 200,000 for the victim support programme, 1.078 million for the individual needs programme, and 22,000 for corporate costs, making a total of 1.3 million. The committee may be aware that funding of some £50 million has been allocated for victims in total over this budgetary period. The committee will recall that in October the department received an additional 1.3 million for VSS, bringing the total funding allocated to VSS in 2014-15 to 11.3 million. The current bid, if met, would provide additional funding for the individual needs programme and the victim support programme. A range of funding pressures within the Delivering Social Change programme have also been identified by departments. In order to alleviate the impacts of the funding shortfalls in these programmes, 2.08 million of funding has been identified for reallocation within the Delivering Social Change programmes, and a submission is currently with ministers for approval just to confirm the allocations. Taking this reallocation into account, the department will submit a bid for the balance of pressures identified by departments, which amounts to 3.53 million in 2014-15. If the bid is not successful, lead departments will have to consider using existing baseline budgets to cover those pressures, or, if this is not possible, either scaling back, postponing or ending programmes. Turning to easements, in respect of easements, the department will declare a reduced capital requirement of £420,000 relating to MLK due to the restriction on development activities on the site and timing issues associated with planning consent. There are also a number of ring-fenced easements. We've been advised that a £300,000 SEUPB reduced requirement has been declared across 3 good relations themes, and SEUPB does not propose to reallocate any of that underspent funding within OFMDFM themes, given the lack of time that's left to close the programme. A ring-fenced easement of £174,000 is being declared in respect of the historical institutional abuse inquiry. £32,000 of this relates to HIA salaries, and a further £142,000 of the easements relates to reductions in legal costs for witnesses. As both SEUPB and the historical institutional abuse inquiry are treated as ring-fenced items, they'll be surrendered in January monitoring, and the funding will go back to DFP. The department intends to send DFP a list of bids and easements on the 2nd of January. If any material bids or adjustments arise between now and then, the department will inform the committee. So I hope that's been helpful, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions that committee members might have.
Okay, just on that final point, Margaret, it's just to clarify in my own mind. 2nd of January is a deadline?
Yes, for
Yes,
DFP,
for
yes.
DFP.
But did they not originally have a deadline of the 3rd of December?
It was in two stages.
Right.
We had to send like technical adjustments for the 2nd December. Bids and easements go for
Okay.
January.
Right. And you're basically here briefing us on what you've already submitted.
Well, no, the bids and easements haven't been submitted.
No, we're identifying busy evenings we're going to make to get any comments from the committee so that we can take account of those in submitting our final return to DFP in January.
Okay. Can I start with the Victims and Survivors Service? And again, I'm simply trying to get my head around, make sure I understand fully the finances here. You said, Mark, that the commitment overall was 50 million in this period. That's 50 million over 4 years. Is it spread 12.5 per year?
No, it's actually increased towards the latter end of the period. You'll recall that last year the baseline was 11.3 million, and there was additional funding received in year to bring it up over 12 million pounds.
Right.
This year we've managed to, with the bid we got in October, to restore that baseline of 11.3, and then this additional bid in January is to try and meet the extra pressures that have emerged.
Mm-hmm. So there were 2 bids in October. The successful one was for the 1.3. The unsuccessful one was for the 1.7. I seem to recall that without the 1.7, there was an assessment that you would be unable to fulfil ministerial commitments.
Well, there have been a number of pressures that have emerged in VSS. They've come primarily from extra victims that have been identified either in the course of this year or whose paperwork hadn't been processed in the course of last year. And the bid that's come forward now is to try and secure additional resources to try and meet those extra victims that have come forward. And it breaks down across the victim support programme of 200k, which would go to groups, 1.078 for the individual needs programme, which is the majority of the bid, and as I say, some funding for corporate costs. But I mean, in this area, I think the funding that has been provided, the extra money in October monitoring will help to meet the commitment that ministers have made to victims.
And the bid in January, there's a further bid for victims?
That's right.
Yes.
Of
1.3 million.
another 1.3?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. And what would that be used for again? You said about $1 million for individual needs?
Just over $1 million for the individual needs programme, 1.078. 200,000 for the victim support programme, which goes out to groups, and 22k for some support for an accountant to help.
So 200,000 would actually go to groups, and groups they lost out in October monitoring because the 1.7 didn't come through. As I understand it, the 1.3 didn't include any provision for the groups.
Well, there would be existing provision for groups in the 11.3 in total. But of the 1.7, some of that, yes, was additional for groups, and some of it was additional for individual needs.
Yes, because there was an overcommitment, I think, for groups. So were groups who had effectively ticked all the boxes and would have qualified for money, except there was no money available.
Well, there had been applications from groups. They had been deemed to be eligible, and there wasn't sufficient funding to cover all those applications that had come forward. Yeah.
Now, again, from memory, I think that total in October was over 400,000. And even if you're successful with this bid, you won't even be able to meet half of that.
Well, it's not so much a question, Chair, we wouldn't be able to meet half of it. This is the bid that's been put forward by the Victims and Survivors Service. So they have obviously revised what they think their need is. So they have revised the figure down. We won't know whether we have sufficient until we find out whether the bid is actually met or not.
Right, okay, so it's really a question for them why
yes.
it's sitting at that rather than the other. Can I ask, given that the political talks that the Secretary of State is chairing are potentially coming to some sort of conclusion, and victims and survivors are a core element on that agenda, have you been asked to look at additional funding pending a possible agreement in these talks?
Well, I think in terms of the talks, there have been a range of queries that have arisen and information requested. I'm not aware of any detail around victims and survivors in particular. But I mean, there are a number of streams to the talks, and you'll probably be more aware of the detail of the talks than I actually am. But certainly, any request for information that have come forward, the department would have met those.
Right. What sort of inquiries would you be getting, Mark?
Well, they haven't been coming to my side of the department. I'm just aware that there have been various papers commissioned information in order to support the discussions.
So you haven't been asked to find another X pounds for potential?
I haven't
agreements?
specifically, in the finance section hasn't been specifically, but the department as a whole may well have been asked what would be the potential demand or what might cost be. I don't know, Chair, to be honest, and I don't want to speculate.
No, I think you're quite right. Okay. Delivering social change, OFMDFM has sought to identify funds that could be reallocated to departments to reduce the shortfall in budget. Have you got a figure on that?
Yes, there's two elements to this. There's 5.6 million of a shortfall that's been identified by departments in overall terms. This is the amount of funding that departments believe that they would need to be able to implement their programmes in full for this year. Of that 5.6 million, in looking across the existing programmes, there are some are spending faster than others, so it's been possible to find 2.08 from within existing programmes and to reallocate to meet that pressure. So that means there's a shortfall of 3.5 million, and that is the extent of the bid that we are making. So there's been some reallocation across programmes to meet pressures elsewhere, and it's basically a 3.5 million shortfall, and that's what the bid is designed to meet.
We were, if you don't mind, it's almost a wee aside here, but we were talking to Dennis McMahon and others last week about the historical institutional abuse inquiry, which falls under DSC, but the budget isn't part of that. And I was wondering why you wouldn't have maybe ring-fenced and non-ring-fenced resource style.
Well, the historical institutional inquiry was an executive commitment, so it came as ring-fence funding, and it's always been treated as ring-fence. So any shortfall or any pressure there is met centrally, and we can't. We don't have to meet a shortfall, nor can we redirect any underspend there. It's all dealt with directly by the executive through DFP, so that's all entirely ring-fenced. The Delivering Social Change funds, there's an overall executive commitment to funding that over a period of years. It comes through in terms of 14 million resource, 15 million capital each year, and then it has to be allocated against the various programmes that have been put in train under Delivering Social Change. And so the task really and the difficulty here is in trying to match the progress of all of those different programmes across different departments, to profile that spend and to stay within the 14 million resource and 15 million capital. Because as you can appreciate, Chair, all sorts of things can happen to slow down or change the nature of those projects across that many departments.
Yeah, and I mean, on that basis, to have a 5.6 million shortfall, it's a very significant percentage of the annual budget.
Well, as I say, the actual shortfall, given that there were some easements elsewhere, the actual shortfall is 3.5 million. And again, I think this comes back to the identification of the profiling of spend. I mean, the budget was set at 14 million and 15 million. The projects have come forward at different rates and different paces. I think I said at a previous committee meeting, it would be nice when these programmes were announced if we all had all the proposals perfectly ready to go, but in practice you get the money in advance of having the programmes and then have to work to develop the programmes, and in the course of that, some are delayed, some come forward quicker, demands change, the actual targeting can change, the whole aim can change, and that then affects what funding you have against your expenditure.
But even, and I think it sounds like it's good work to bring in an extra 2 million to kind of easements, you're still sitting at well over 10% of the budget for the year as shortfall.
Yes, there is a pressure. There's no doubt there is a pressure across a range of these programmes.
And the SEUPB handed back £300,000 that was set aside for good relations.
Well, this relates to a range of projects that the EU or the SEUPB are funding, and the same thing applies. It can be projects that don't proceed at the appropriate pace. There can be delays in getting approvals and so forth. So that money has been surrendered. It's up to the SEUPB to decide whether they can allocate that to other programmes or projects within the overall programme that can be spent within the time frame.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not criticising you, Mark, I want to emphasise that, but, you know, of the MLAs who are here, or any of the MLAs who are members of this committee, would take you out on a constituency basis to groups for whom £300 would be very useful money. And with 300,000 not being spent, which was earmarked for good relations, I mean, is there not some sort of early warning system in place that would have alerted people to the fact that here was a problem that needed addressed?
Which there is regular monitoring of all these various projects. But as I say, there can be a range of reasons why there can be delay in taking them forward and in achieving the spend. And as we move towards the end of the EU programme, the concern of the SEUPB is that these programmes can be delivered on time, and that if funding can't be spent in one area, it can be reallocated to another area, and that's what they would seek to do.
Yeah, and I know, you know, the SEUPB is an administrative body, and therefore doing things in the right way and the right time is core business to them. But I think politically we should be more concerned with the fact that are these programmes actually working, and if they need another 3 or 6 months, and that makes the difference between partially working, not working, and working to the best advantage, we should be given the opportunity, I think, to lobby on those points. I mean, I just think
the majority of the programmes were meant to finish in March with the budget, but there's actually going to be a budget. We haven't got the budget allocation yet, but there's going to be a budget allocation to finish the existing projects that should be complete in June next year.
Yeah.
So basically, money will be getting rolled over for those projects into next year.
And is there further underspend and good relations themes within the department? Or is that it?
At this point in time, we haven't identified any further underspenditure in good relations.
Okay. And then just to go back to the historical institutional abuse inquiry, Mark, I mean, to begin with, the budget for that came out of monitoring. That's correct, isn't it? Up until this point.
It's identified in year, yeah.
And now it's got ring-fenced 5-point-something million?
Yep. You mean for 15-16? Looking forward, yes, it's been put straight into our budget.
So it has its own budget line, which it didn't have before. It was coming out of monitoring rounds.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And is the commitment that it will have a budget line through to completion now?
Well, that is certainly the case for 15-16. Whether it's the case beyond that, but the inquiry won't be proceeding much beyond 15.
It goes into the following year, but
the following year.
But the executive have agreed that it will be funded until completion.
Okay.
There hasn't been any doubt, Chair, about the funding being available. It's just how it comes and when it comes.
Well,
has been
the First Minister did raise some concerns in June monitoring about the future of funding, but I think it's well understood now that the executive commitment is that it will complete with the appropriate resources. Members, any issues you wish to raise? Okay, we'll see you in a mark. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Well, unless we're having this kind of philosophical discussion about whether to adjourn a meeting is making a decision, which cannot be done with 4 people around the table. I am proposing to thank you as members, particularly thank the staff for all their work this calendar year, and to wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
You too.
Happy New Year. See you in 2015.
Yes.
Committee room 30.